The autistic brain, emotional radar, and PTSD.
The world of emotions is hell for those with autism. Emotions within you and in other people. We've had descriptions of the power of the emotions within you, but it's also in other people.
But we should never forget that most autistics have some form of trauma and resulting PTSD. Invalidation trauma. This will cause a lot of frustration, anxiety, anger, rage, being hypervigilant. So the PTSD-5 writes about trauma and stressor-related disorders. What you feel is no one can be trusted, persistent negative emotional state, fear, anger, shame, markedly diminished interest, or participation in significant activities, feelings of detachment or estrangement from others, irritable behavior and angry outbursts, physical aggression toward people or objects, exaggerated startle response, sleep disturbance, impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. See for yourself. Irritable behavior and angry outbursts with little or no provocation is not autism. PTSD. What so many autistics struggle with: sleep disturbance, PTSD, impairment in social functioning. So, again, it's also PTSD that's an overlap with autism. And you have recurrent, involuntary, and intrusive, distressing memories of the traumatic events. How do you think that will make you feel emotionally? If you have flashbacks, of course there will be persistent avoidance of stimuli associated with a traumatic event.
Can living with high-functioning autism cause complex PTSD? Have there been any studies on the co-occurrence of these two conditions?
There are starting to be, and what's interesting is that I'm identifying, as I go through the developmental history of some of the adults that I see, PTSD. Post-traumatic stress or shock disorder is a reference to what you've experienced, and many with autism have experienced quite traumatic events for a variety of reasons. But what counts is how you personally experience that event and your coping mechanisms. And for those with autism, their coping mechanisms with trauma may not be as effective as neurotypical. So it goes deeper, longer, and it is more likely to affect their current circumstances. Now, in trauma, we often find that one of the best solutions is a quality relationship. But for some with autism, a quality relationship as an adult may appear elusive, but for neurotypicals, it can be one of the most effective therapies. So, yes, there is an association because those with autism are easy victims of a range of abuse. They may have witnessed trauma too, but their way of understanding the motives of others, the intensity of the emotions, and not being able to have closure means clinically we need to develop greater expertise in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I would say autism and trauma should be looked at together by any therapist. They need to know about both. See the difference between both or the overlaps.
And the problem can be within the person. I don't have many intermediate states, and I find it almost impossible to moderate my internal emotional response. Whereas neurotypicals will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10. And it seems that anything that should have been 4, 5, 6 comes out as that intensity. And when I talk to people with autism about that, and it's very real, very powerful and intense emotion. And throughout that person's day and life, they are experiencing very intense emotions, which is absolutely exhausting. Emotional sensitivity. There is a terrible error in understanding autism to say a lack of empathy. It's a huge insult to some of the kindest people I know as friends, colleagues, and family members. There is great caring. But I think there is a difference here that needs to be recognized, and this is being overly sensitive to another person's negative mood, infected by it. And it's almost as though somebody's in a negative mood, an equivalent level of a cold, but the person with autism gets infected by it, but they don't get a cold, they get the flu. And sometimes I'm really angry, sad, anxious. Where did this come from? What in my life has happened that will justify this emotional reaction? No, nothing's happened. You've just been with someone that is having that feeling. So it's not just simply the emotions within you, it's emotions within other people too. And especially sensitive to negative moods of disappointment, anxiety, or agitation. And that person picks it up. We call this empathic attunement. These are further quotes. There's a kind of instant subconscious reaction to the emotional states of other people, but it's been there since childhood. If someone approaches me for a conversation and they are full of worry, fear, or anger, I find myself suddenly in the same state of emotion. And this means that sometimes social withdrawal is not necessarily due to social confusion or sensory sensitivity. The withdrawal is a protection mechanism from being with toxic others with emotionality.
Give yourself permission to immediately walk away from anything that gives you bad vibes. There is no need to explain or make sense of it. Just trust the little inner voice when it talks to you.
And as we had from Yen a moment ago, I do all that I can to keep those with autism out of psychiatric hospitals, especially adolescent psychiatric hospitals, because it really is hell for that person in terms of the emotionality of other people. I'm able to distinguish very subtle cues that others would not see, or it might be a feeling I pick up from them. What neurotypicals do is they tend to use the visual and auditory. The visual is the facial expression and gesture. The auditory is the tone of voice. Now, in autism, you have a different sensory profile. And I think this is in a sixth sense sensitivity. And is able to pick up emotions in other people using channels that neurotypicals aren't aware of.
Indeed. Sometimes the vibe between two people is instant. It's real, and they just get each other. Don't overthink the vibe, just explore it. You really react to any person because you feel their vibe. That's like having a radar that will detect danger or safety. You either feel repulsion or you feel instant liking. There are very few people who manage to make me feel completely relaxed and safe. That's a beautiful feeling. And it's instantly. A person doesn't need to say anything. It's about the vibe. And there are some people that really make your skin crawl, and that's instantly. Listen to those feelings.
Accurate, definitely accurate. Trust your intuition there. But can be overpowering. It's a sixth sense. So you avoid some social situations due to being sensitive to negative vibe.
I had that a few times in my life. There was instant dislike of a person, and it was never wrong. I was once forced to interact with such a person. I didn't want to, but it was at work, so I had to. Yeah, the result was a disaster. So trust that intuition. It will prevent disaster from happening. Listen to it. Listen to it. Don't ignore. Autistics tend to get bullied. For some reason, narcissists or psychopaths really look for those qualities like empathy. Those are the people they can exploit the most. Autistics tend to have social naivety, too much trust, and empathy. They care. Sociopaths, narcissists, or psychopaths usually target women who are nurturing and very trusting, kind and caring. Often their targets are women who have morals, since it is much easier for a sociopath to con a good person than another con artist. Sociopaths can quickly determine a person's weak spots and vulnerabilities and will exploit them throughout the relationship. Autistics unfortunately stand out because of their social awkwardness, so it's easy to spot them, I would say, and that's what predators are looking for.
A couple of things to remember. There is no sincere communication with a narcissist. They're never communicating sincerely. They abuse language. They abuse truth. They're not talking to you with a point like a normal human being would. Whatever it is that they're talking about is a smokescreen for their intent. Talking is not really what they do. They signal. And what they're signaling is, I'm better than you. What they're signaling is, I'm superior to you and to everybody else. What they're signaling is, you should fear losing me. So that's one thing to understand. And if somebody is communicating with you and they're not being sincere, then you shouldn't be sincere either. Abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere. Just let it go. It's not going to happen. You keep throwing your sincerity, your earnestness, your empathy into this sucking black hole, and it never ends. You'll never win. You'll never get to a point where you're like, yes, finally, I got my point across. I've been heard. No, because here's the second point. And I got this from a counseling psychotherapist who specializes in narcissism, and his name is Gary Klein. And he says, when communicating with the narcissist or the borderlines, remember, the point is there is no point. The point is confusion. The point is chaos. The point is to have no point.